We are on. Welcome everybody to March Inner Sanctum webinar series. So great to have you all here. Hello, we've got people in the US and people from Australia. So welcome. This is a webinar series about being a deliberate creator. So who we are as physical beings as well as spiritual beings is creative potential. And I do these webinar series to help people understand their creative potential while physically focused, because I think that physically focused is the hardest to understand, that we're actually creating everything that's happening to us. Actually, Krista and I were just talking about that before we started, because I was talking about the book series that I'm putting together called the Awakening Soul series, and how few of the stories in the book series are people that never thought about life after death ever, because they were busy moms, busy doctors, busy with their third dimensional life, and something happened like an NDE or the death, like the suicide of a son, which is Elisa who I'm speaking with, or an NDE or the death of a loved one, that made me actually ask, or like Gloria, the wanting to, reemerge, wanting to go to the other side and asking about death and who we are and what happens. And those questions spark that awakening process. I think that death is one of the things that sparks the awakening process more than anything, because it is the thing that gives us so much grief. But at the same time, that grief sparks within us those questions like, who am I and where do I come from? It did it for me when my mother died when I was like 16. Not that I was grieving so much, because I watched her suffer for about 2 or 3 years with her illness, but the questions like, where do we come from? And interestingly enough, when we do reemerge, or when we do touch that side or have a near-death experience or explore and discover who we are, we find out that who we are is creative potential, and that our thoughts and our vibration is what's creating everything, that all of it really is an illusion of just information and energy. And we as thinkers are creators, and we're molding the energy. We're molding the energy with our vibration. Not only are we creating this world, we are perceiving it. How we perceive the world gives us how we experience the world. So two people, for instance, could look at the same thing. One could perceive it with horror and one could perceive it with joy. And so two different experiences, same happening. So being creative is actually how we're perceiving it, what we're thinking about in anything. Like Donald Trump. Let's look at Donald Trump, for instance. There are a lot of people in America who are looking at that saying, oh my God, this is the worst thing that ever happened. And they're really unhappy. And there are a lot of people that are saying this is the best thing that ever happened. And they're very happy. So two different experiences, same thing happening, same person. So our perception of the world is actually how we're creating our own world. But not only how we're creating our own world, but how we're creating the world for everyone else, because our vibration, our energy, our perception plugs into an energy form, plugs into a frequency, plugs into a vibration, and that vibration expands the more people that are plugged into it. So the larger that vibration, that expansion of vibration, the more available it is for people to plug into it. So that's why it's so important to accentuate the positive, to be happy, to be joyful, to look at tragedy or to look at trauma and find a different perspective, to find a different way of looking at things that makes you feel good about it. So it's really interesting how there are a lot of positives that come out of the negatives. But as we focus on what the positives are, we tune into that frequency, we expand that energy and we expand that frequency. And as we expand that frequency, we make manifestation of what is in alignment with that frequency more possible. So that's why it's so important that we just get happy in our own personal lives, and as well as get happy looking out into the world and seeing the tragedy that's happening and finding a way to think in a more positive way about it, focusing on the solutions. One of the biggest things that's happening that is the disaster of our time is the pollution of our planet, is the way that we're destroying the planet. The oceans, I had a marine biologist who was from overseas. He'd spent 8 years in Townsville here in Australia, which is up the north of Queensland. And he worked on the reef and he had to leave after 8 years because he said the reef over 8 years destroyed so much that it was so depressing he had to get away from it. So he came with really bad news that the way we're destroying the planet. But then you look out on the net and you see, I posted something on Facebook the other day about a marine biologist that took coral and broke it up, and what they found that when they broke the coral up, it grew exponentially. And so they're planting that coral back into the water, and these new coral reefs are springing up all over the place, like really quickly. And so there is actually hope for regeneration. So as we focus on what can happen, we actually create it more. Isn't that fantastic? So that's a way that we can become creators and different makers at the same time. Does anyone have any questions? Everyone that has had a near-death experience that I've spoken to has spoken about this creative process. And when I spoke to Krista on the show, I asked her about that too. And she said, yeah, that was one of the biggest things I learned. Is that right, Krista?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, because in my experience, like up until my near-death experience, I didn't know anything about the law of attraction. I didn't know the powerful creative being I was until afterwards, and many years later, when I learned about the law of attraction and then re-examined my near-death experience and realized that I was a creator of my experience in co-creational power with the universe. So that was like this, wow, like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is life. So that's how I learned about what a powerful creator I am. I'm the same as every one of us. And I have the same potential as every one of us to create whatever I want. So yeah. Beautiful.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it, how powerful we are, and that's why it's so important to really find a positive vibration. Like, you know, I call my show Accentuate the Positive. It's not be positive, because we can't be positive all the time. We just can't. There is this stuff that goes down that you just like, you really grapple with, but you can accentuate you can find it. Like, what's the gift here? What's this showing me? How can I? Because it's not so much, you can't change what's going on outside there, but you can change the way you look at it. And when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Like, that's famously what Wayne Dyer said. I think he stole it from somebody, but when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And take it away. Krista Gorman is a physician's assistant in a busy ER hospital. And in 2000, you had a near-death experience while giving birth. Do you want to just share a bit of your story, Krista?
Sure. I was induced into labor, and my labor was progressing too slow, and my daughter was in distress, so they had to put an internal monitor in her scalp, and it caused her to have a reflex, and that strength of the reflex pushed amniotic fluid into my bloodstream, and I had an amniotic fluid embolism. It happened like that. So one minute I'm talking to my mother, and the next minute I'm having trouble breathing, and then I'm out. So my experience was, after I was gasping for air, I just had this feeling of just divine grace kind of come over me, like everything is perfect. And then I passed out. The next thing I know, I was hovering far above my body and watching everything go on below. And I saw my daughter delivered, and I didn't know what any of this stuff was. I could see and I could feel emotion, energy, and I was particles. I watched as my particles came up from the body and came up to where I could see, and I was just kind of like hovering there, like a cloud, like a static cloud, and watching this movie going on. And I didn't know what any of it was. I didn't know that it was people or anything. And I'm watching it, and it was interesting. And I looked around, and I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I want to know more about it. So I started to kind of float around the room. And then as I started to feel like I knew, like, oh, that I know what that is. What is that? What is that? And then I felt this tug, and I was like, no, I want to stay. And it pulled harder. I'm like, okay, I'll go. So I went. I chose to leave, and it chose for me too. And then I went into this space that was this dense particulate matter, like I was, but just very, very dense. And I was reabsorbed in it. And I felt this incredible sense of love. It just permeated me, and I got this download, and it was all the questions I'd ever asked in my existence. And it all boiled down to one point, and that was love. And I got it. It's like I just kind of went, ooh, and it just expanded. And then I saw this little point of light, and I went towards it, and it got bigger and bigger. And there was an opening with shadow beings there. And I was drawn in, and I was feeling compassion and desire to help them. I could feel their need for my help. So I went in, and they were there to do whatever it was that they were choosing to do there, but they needed my energy, and I wanted to give it to them. I wanted to help them. So they started to come at me, just dart at me and dart away. And they were literally like taking my particles. And then I said, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. So I chose me over giving myself away to these entities. And I was again drawn out.
It's so interesting. I just want to talk about that's a really big lesson for a lot of difference makers. And I think a lot of people on this call are the same. And I've spoken to a few of you that have, been overwhelmed with that desire to help people, but feeling overwhelmed by the energies, like as empaths too, the energies that come at you. And then you're over in this place of overwhelm because people are so upset, and you're empathically tuning in, and then you sort of match their vibration, and that becomes, because that's, as healers, that's really where we go wrong. This is what my daughter does all the time. She's so empathic. And she thinks that if someone's upset, if I bring myself down to your vibration and I get upset with you too, I'm connecting to you and I'm helping you. But she just gets into this place of overwhelm where she can't help anyone because she can't help herself. That's such an important lesson, don't you think, Krista? You have to stay high.
So it's the practicing of detachment, of loving detachment. Because we're here to connect and to have relationships, and we mirror one another. So during the course of a relationship, the ego comes in at varying points and likes to run the show and likes to attach to whatever's going on to that person. And so to be able to detach lovingly while still having, the love, compassion for the other, but not owning what it is that they feel. Like you said, being empathic, not owning that, but letting it flow through you, because that's all we, the divine guidance that we receive is energy. And when we're helping somebody else, it's the divine, really, all that energy is moving right through us to them, and it's circulating back. But instead of letting it stop with our ego, stop and create dis-ease in our bodies, we can just let it flow, detach, just let it flow through. So yeah, that detachment is so important.
But there's this fine balance of actually being connected to someone and be loving detachment, that I'm connected to you through the love that we both are, but I'm not going to indulge in your pain, because if I come down to that vibration, I can't help you. I heard that Jesus Christ, Sananda, he was so connected to love. He was so connected to the truth of his being that when he saw people dripping with their illnesses, when he saw the leper with their limbs falling off, he wasn't deluded by the illusion of the physical life. He saw only their soul, and their soul is love and light. And he, through his power of influence, as he gazed upon them, knowing who they are as that light, he would allow them to connect to that, and that spontaneous healing would happen. That's how he did his spontaneous healing, because he was so connected to the love and not connected to the pain that completely dominated. That vibration completely overrode the vibration that the person was holding, that was allowing their suffering.
That's such a beautiful statement. I have to tell you that when I first started in the ER, I was vibrating so high.
Yeah.
That I often, and I'm very freely saying this, I almost found it I was incapable sometimes of seeing this person as sick.
Yes.
Because I didn't see them as sick. So I had to sort of like ground myself. And, you know, I see everyone as love manifestations in varying degrees and varying forms. And that's what I feel towards a person when I walk in the room. So it's like, yeah, that is such a powerful thing, that holding your vibration and helping to bring that person and helping to elevate them to your vibration, holding that space for them and meeting them there.
About the love. I just love talking about the love on the other side, because as we talk about it, we evoke it, and it gives us all the opportunity to feel it more.
Yeah.
Do you want to sort of just, you know, explore that love that you felt?
Yeah. It was something that, you know, you'll hear in a lot of people say it in near-death experiences accounts, but it's something that words don't touch it.
Mm.
The depth of it, the strength of it, the enormity of it, it's all encompassing. And, you know, I heard Joseph Campbell, who is somebody that has been like a guru to me, say, you know, he quoted, I think, the Upanishad that said, no tongue has soiled it, because it's that divine. But it's everything that there is. Love is everything. So for me to be able to bring that love, I go like this because it's like, I think it's out there, but where I went, you know, where I transitioned to bring that feeling of love here, the way that I do it is I practice love in my life, literally practice it. So I've trained my ego brain to look at life as love. You know, every little thing, everything is love. We can find it silly, you know, ridiculous, whatever, but it really is. And if we stop and think about it and connect with that idea, it like breaks everything wide open. So loving ourselves, having that self-love is the ultimate love, because from that springs everything. So to nurture love of the self is our fundamental reason for being here. That's why we're here. And we do that through our connections to other people, through our relationships. We mirror one another so that every single thing that's happening between you and another person is a lesson. And it's a lesson for both of you. And it's a lesson for these people and those people. It's fractals. It goes out infinitely. So if we can learn to truly, purely love ourselves, and you were saying, we were talking about it earlier, that's how we change the world. That's how we raise the vibration. It's all about loving ourselves. That's all we have to do. We're good. You know, we're done.